Welcome back for another week of conversation. Our topic series this week is around the growth development for forensic interviewers. I'm Christina Rouse, Program Manager for CAC Development with the Southern Regional Child Advocacy Center, which is a program of the National Child Advocacy Center. And I am so pleased to be joined with the esteemed folks in my conversation today who have a lot of knowledge and experience around developing forensic interviewers. And I'm so excited to hear all of their thoughts about onboarding your forensic interviewers. So I will have everyone introduce themselves, and then we're going to get right to the conversation because I know we all have a lot to say. So Liz, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi and welcome. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Christina, for the invitation. I'm Liz Ghilardi. I am the Forensic Interview Program Manager with Children's Wisconsin, based out of Milwaukee.
Great, thanks for being here. And Heather.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Christina, for having us. When you introduced us and you said esteemed friends, I thought you were going to say senior friends. So either way, we'll go with it. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Heather Stewart. I am the Deputy Director of the Utah Children's Justice Center program, which is our state chapter in Utah. I've been here for about 5 years, and previous to that, I managed our busiest CAC in the state for about 23 years.
Great, thank you. I wasn't gonna even mention how long we've all been in the field because that's another conversation. So thanks for joining us. And last but definitely not least, Julie.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Christina, for the invitation. My name is Julie Keniston, and I am a program manager for the National Criminal Justice Training Center. And I am also a contract forensic interviewer at a local CAC here. And just to go along the lines of my dear friend, Heather, this is year 32 for me for interviewing. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I think this is a conversation that a lot of folks are having in the field right now, right? The field of forensic interviewing, the profession of forensic interviewing is really moving into a direction of more professionalism and development. And so our conversation about onboarding forensic interviewers today is hopefully to set the stage of how we want to see the culture shift in regards to thinking about onboarding your interviewers. So very often CACs send new forensic interviewers to their initial protocol training and think that's part and maybe the only thing they do for onboarding. And we're hopeful that at the end of our 20-minute conversation today, you will have some different ideas or thoughts around how you can bolster your onboarding process for interviewers in regards to keeping them sustained, retained, and professionally developed for a long time. So we're going to get right to it. And the first thing I'm curious to know, and I think of the field would be also wanting to know, is why does onboarding even matter? What's the purpose of onboarding our interviewers, and why should CAC leaders and supervisors make onboarding a priority? And Heather, I'm going to start with you. What thoughts do you have around that?
I think one of the things that we've seen evolve over time is this elevation in professionalizing forensic interviewers and understanding that our training is ongoing for the rest of our FI lives. It's not a one and done. We were with a group last week talking about this, and people talked about when you go to your initial FI training, you should consider that as graduation from kindergarten. You know, that's the beginning, and that starts the rest of your schooling and your learning journey as a forensic interviewer. And the beginning of that journey starts with really strong onboarding. So often interviewers come to a training and they go back to their CAC and kind of live in a vacuum where they're not getting the support and mentoring that they need to strengthen their skill and feel more confident. So I think that's one reason that this conversation is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Liz, I know you run a fabulous program at Children's Wisconsin, and I know you feel very strongly about onboarding. So why is that important to onboard your interviewers?
Well, I agree 100% with what Heather said, and that this is really a profession that we're developing. And I think when people see really good forensic interviewers, it looks easy and they think all you're doing is talking to kids, right? Well, it's way harder than that. And we are a profession, and I think we want to follow the research, which is really important. And there's quite a bit out there now that talks about all the things we should be doing as good forensic interviewers. And people come to CACs because they want a good product and a good service. And we are the experts. We're the premier, we should be, I hope, the premier forensic interviewers in our area. And the one other thing that I would add in talking about professionalism is there are a lot of training that I do. I equate, being a forensic interviewer and a specialist to being a doctor. We would never send a doctor out to do some new procedure with 5 days of training and no ongoing practice. And I think that seems to resonate with people that this is a really important skill and a really important role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely not a one and done lifestyle for forensic interviewers. And I think a lot of times the onboarding piece, right, that I just got hired and then what, is a gap that we don't tend to think about a lot. So Julie, what do you think about that fills that onboarding and why that gap is so important?
One of the things that I think about a lot is the fact that what we do is different. And we have people coming to us from all different backgrounds, whether they are coming as a child protective services person or a law enforcement person, or they're coming into a dedicated forensic interview position, and maybe they worked with youth in a youth serving agency or something. And so that onboarding is taking some of those skills that they might have that are natural and really helping them hone those skills in a way that not only meets the needs of the youth that are sitting in the room, but also those jurisdictional expectations. So onboarding meets a multitude of needs for any individual CAC, but also for that individual who's growing as an interviewer. Because you could be an interviewer. I could go work for Liz and be the best trained person on the planet, and then go work for Heather and still need onboarding, because there are going to be things that I need to learn as I move to that space and understand how things work in that jurisdiction. So onboarding has a really important place, I think.
Yeah, and I think what we're hopeful for is that we want people to think about onboarding outside of training, right? We can get trained in protocol after protocol and skill development all day long, but without the onboarding of what our role is as an interviewer and what the expectations are from our team, I think we could potentially be setting up interviewers to fail without that groundwork and foundation set as it relates to onboarding. So let's give some practical tools to the field. What would be some buckets of components that you would include in your onboarding process for your interviewers? And Liz, we'll start with you this time. What would you include in onboarding?
Well, first of all, what we do in our onboarding after the 5-day training is the new interviewer will watch a number of interviews, with experienced people. And I'm fortunate to work in a huge system, and we've got a lot of experienced interviewers, so they may travel around a little bit, but they are watching them do those interviews in real time, and sometimes watching them watching past interviews and sitting down with the interviewer and talking through what's happening. It's not, the whys and the wherefores. And then the next step is usually doing a practice interview with somebody else's child, not a victim, but maybe a colleague's child, just about a non-abuse related event, just to get them used to the camera and the observation. And then they do a number of interviews, and there's no real number that but 15, 20 maybe, where they're being mentored and observed and, by an experienced interviewer. So that's really the beginning part. And then there's, we do some extended things after that as well.
Great. Wonderful. Heather, what are you all doing in Utah to onboard your interviewers?
I would echo a lot of what Liz already said. I think two key pieces for me that I think are important and that are part of the onboarding process, especially if you're introducing a forensic interviewer who's brand new to a team or a CAC, and they didn't come up through the ranks, and the team's not already familiar with that person, some kind of warm handoff of that brand new forensic interviewer to the team from someone that the team already trusts is really important, because they're trusting that person to collect the evidence and do all of the things that they need to do, and they don't know that person at all. So, having someone sort of vouch for them and like, I've got this person, I'm going to coach them through it. I'm not going to leave your CAC in a terrible way, because everybody has a beginning point, so for me, that warm handoff is really pretty critical, I would say. And then the other piece, I think, to tag on to what Liz said, is that once the interviewer is doing actual interviews, to give them as much immediate feedback on their interviews as soon as we can is really important to help build their confidence, build their skill, and help them make sure that they're not accidentally developing bad habits that their team may not be able to correct for them, because the team doesn't have the expertise in the forensic interviewing in the same way that some of us do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I love that handoff portion of onboarding. A lot of times people don't think about that, how disruptive that transition can be in your team with new staff and whatnot. So I love being able to build that trust in. Julie, what would you say are the big takeaways of what to include in onboarding?
I love what Liz and Heather said. I think what I would add too is taking some time to teach a new person how to code or map interviews, to really get them thinking about question types. And so while they're watching interviews, like Liz talked about, or while they're doing that observation, that they've got a purpose to do that they're starting to pay attention to the questions that are used and then what the result of those questions are. And so those of you that are doing some type of coding or mapping, the value of that. And it certainly helps with our ongoing approach to learning and evolving in our own skills. But I think that's a good skill to start pretty early on in the onboarding process. And the other thing that I talk a lot about with my colleagues at the CAC, where I have the absolute fortune to work, is that it started with giving interviewers the sibling interviews or the at-risk ofs or the precautionaries. And I've really fought hard to say, we're teaching people how to do interviews. And I think we need to give them the kids that are in the disclosure process. Because I think what happens is we give them the more difficult ones, give them the kid that there isn't something to transition to. We don't really have a way to get to the topic. And so they spin their wheels, and we're expecting them to be critical thinkers in that interview. And they don't even know where they're going. And we're asking them to have these higher level processing situations. And so one of the things that we've really moved toward, and I would love to hear from Liz and Heather what they think, but instead of thinking we're making it easier on them because their early interviews might not end up in court, by giving them the siblings or the at-risk ofs to really get those skills, it's doing all these things that these two ladies talked about, but giving them the disclosing kids so that they've got a process, they can transition to the topic, they can work on their details, they can get the feedback right away that Heather's talking about, they can see some success, and they're not having to make those creative in the moment decisions that we really don't have research that'll back it up to let them know if they're making good choices. So those two things I think have been very, very helpful.
Yeah, I love that. I would tend to think that most people aren't thinking about how to assign cases to new interviewers, right? They're thinking of maybe giving them ones that might not go anywhere prosecutorially, but that might not be the best scenario for new interviewers. So I love that you mentioned that. That's a great component to think about. So we know all of the things that can benefit folks from being onboarded. What are the potential fallouts if you don't onboard your interviewers? I think that's important for the field to know as well. So Julie, kick us off with the potential fallouts for not onboarding our people.
I have found that recently my phrase of the last 6 months has been going rogue. That what we're seeing is that if we don't do a really solid job lifting people up and giving them the guardrails or giving them kind of the, we use the word guidelines a lot in forensic interviewing, so I don't want to use it in this context, but giving them the guardrails of practice and some real critical thinking in the context of those guardrails, they will go rogue because they're trying to do the best that they can. And I think onboarding can set the stage for that. And I think for me, what that means is not just saying, do what I say, but it's saying, let's guide you through this, but also give you the purpose in it. And I think a lot in forensic interviewing, and present company 100% does these things, is to really think about, why do we do what we do? What is the purpose behind what we do, so that people can make educated decisions around the choices that they're making and not go rogue. And that's the part that I see the most. They'll go to a training, they'll go to a conference, they'll hear some brilliant speaker, some really creative idea, and then they just infuse it into their thing. And, this person, I heard this person say this, and they infuse it. And that can be very dangerous. And so I think without really good onboarding and those guardrails and the strength of team and that process to wrap around, that can be a problem.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We were having that conversation because symposium was last week and there was so much valuable information. I was fearful of all the new folks in the crowds thinking like, oh, I'm going to go implement this. And just like, if they don't have onboarding or structure back at their programs, what potential damage that could do for the cases and children they're serving. So Heather, in short, if you could give a Cliff Note thought on what the fallout could be for onboarding, what would you say?
Well, I'm going to pivot a little bit. We've talked a lot about the impact on the MDT. I'm going to talk about the impact on families. Often families bring a child under our roof at a CAC and hand their baby over to us and say, talk to her or him, tell me if something happened and what I need to do about it. And they generally trust, our bottom line on that. And if we haven't onboarded people properly to conduct the most high quality interview that they can, they may get flawed results from that interview, give that information to the caregiver, who then is going according to that information that may not be entirely accurate. And I think that's a huge disservice. We really are responsible to give kids the very best shot at the best FI when they come under our roof.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of times people think that developing interviewers is going to give them good interviews, which hopefully it does, but that has a ripple effect to our team and to the cases that we're serving with our kids and families. So I love that. And with all of us here, we could talk for days about onboarding our interviewers. And so what we're hopeful to do is that the information you heard inside this 20 minutes gave you some innovative ideas or thoughts just about how your program is structured, and maybe some places that you could input some new onboarding techniques to support your interviewers. If you want to join us for part 2 of a further conversation, we're going to dive a little deeper into the weeds on onboarding and have more of a real talk conversation. You can click the link below and watch that video, but make sure you follow us for the next 2 weeks on Facebook and LinkedIn to provide additional resources, trainings, webinars. We're going to link to a lot of things so that you can help develop your interviewers at your programs in a way that hopefully elevates the field of interviewing, which we all here hope and work every day at doing. So thank you all for joining me. It was a great conversation, and we'll see everyone soon.